I do think the gene editing and how they're looking at solutions for how can we make pigs resistant to PRRS, I think is interesting. We just can't afford to have some of these challenges that we do right now with mortality in the U.S. swine herd because of this disease.
Well, welcome to Clear Conversations. We have taken the show on the road. As you can see, we are in Des Moines, Iowa at the World Pork Expo. And today we're talking to the host of the Pork Podcast. Her name is Jennifer Shike. Thank you for being here with us, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you've had a long week here talking a lot, and we're going to ask you to talk more today, but you just have such an interesting story and an interesting perspective about the pork industry. So how has the expo been for you, and what are you hearing at the expo?
Well, it's been great. I love the World Pork Expo because I love the people in the pork industry, and that's where, they're all here. And so it's been really fun to just have conversations with producers, some of my favorite researchers and veterinarians, leaders in our industry. There's been a lot of different conversations. It's always a time to see a lot of cool technology. The topic of artificial intelligence is always hot. A lot of those things, but I've heard a lot more people talk about disease and some of the challenges that we have. And so really when it comes down to it, the big disease that stood out was PRRS. I think one of the challenges our producers face today is that PRRS used to kind of take a break in the summertime and kind of dip a little bit. And several veterinarians said, we're not going to see that this year. And so that's tough because for producers who have been battling it for a while, you just kind of hope you get maybe that seasonal reprieve. Yeah. And so, but one thing that encouraged me was hearing so many different types of research that's out there right now, different projects underway, different ways they're looking at how can we make the pigs' life better, how can we help them maybe become more resilient to fight off PRRS or to help them recover from PRRS more quickly. And there's a lot of conversation around let's eliminate PRRS, and that's a big process. So again, I really enjoyed all the conversations, but the PRRS topic was definitely one that I heard over and over again.
And that's really interesting to us because we do a lot of research at UC Davis. Our researchers do, I shouldn't say not me, but our researchers do a lot of, and they're working with CRISPR too and working with PRRS and that sort of thing. Is there anything on the horizon that does give you a little bit of optimism as far as PRRS and the research going on with it?
Well, one of the things that I think is exciting, and regardless of whatever your personal feelings are about it, is I do think the gene editing and how they're looking at solutions for how can we make pigs resistant to PRRS, I think is interesting. And we've got to figure out how we're going to deal with this because we just can't afford to have some of these challenges that we do right now with mortality in the U.S. swine herd because of this disease. And so I'd love to eliminate it. That's going to take a long time and a lot of cooperation, but I think there's a really big interest to do so. But I also think you can't deny that the science and the technology around what gene editing could do to help with swine health, it's definitely something that's interesting to me.
It is very interesting. So let's talk about that. How did you get into this industry? How did you get into this?
Well, I grew up in Washington, Iowa, and I bring that up because the president of the National Pork Producers Council, Rob Brenneman, is from Washington. And our little community is one of the biggest swine production areas in the country. And so it's a very big pig country. I grew up with horses. I showed horses. Okay. We had some commercial sheep, we had some commercial cattle. My brother started showing pigs, and at some point I decided to try to show pigs too. Got involved in livestock judging, and that led me to Black Hawk East, and that's a junior college in Kewanee, Illinois, and that's also where I first learned about some opportunities in the swine industry. So I had an internship with the National Swine Registry between my sophomore and junior years of college, and I worked for their magazine, and that's where I really thought I would go. I wanted to be an editor of a magazine, but that's not exactly where my path took me for a while. I went on to Kansas State University, where I was also on the livestock judging team, and interned with the Angus Journal and got a little taste of the cattle world. But that boss who hired me from the National Swine Registry as an intern gave me a job offer when I left Kansas State to come and start up a junior program for youth in the swine industry. So the first 10 years of my career, I was focused on building the National Junior Swine Association, and that is an organization for kids who show Duroc, Hampshire, Landrace, and Yorkshire swine. And we started with like a show and a couple hundred kids. And when I left, we had around 12,000 members from all across the country, and lots of shows, leadership conferences, scholarship programs, just kind of like a version of 4-H or FFA, but specifically targeted towards, youth that had a passion for purebred swine.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because at the heart of everything I do, I am just very excited about agriculture, but I've particularly fallen in love with the people of the swine industry, and I just think there's so many great opportunities for young people in it. And so, understanding that background and the fact that I devoted 10 years to just trying to help kind of kids plug into the industry in some way and come back to it, I think is a big part of who I am still today. I then went to the University of Illinois and worked for animal science and crop science as a news writer. I had 2 little kids, and my husband, who's an animal scientist there, was like, there's this job where you could stay home a little bit more. You wouldn't have to travel so much, and you could go just work at the university, and you could be a writer again. What do you think? And I was like, kind of picking up on the hint of it was just hard. He was busy and coaching the judging team and traveling, and I was trying to haul a baby and a 2-year-old, and it was getting challenging. So I will never regret that. I hated leaving the National Swine Registry, but it was a really good move for my family. And I spent the next 8 years at the university and eventually moved into a director of marketing and communications position where I led our college through a rebranding, really opened my eyes to kind of that land-grant mission in a deeper way than I experienced than being a student. It was it was different. And so I also learned how to take research from scientists, which I know you can relate to, and turn it around and make it something that was palatable and understandable to the lay public or to producers. And so I really enjoyed that. And I feel like then when Farm Journal approached me about the editor position for Farm Journal's pork, it seemed like a really natural fit for me. And I've seen this industry from so many different perspectives. And while maybe I admit that I am not a commercial hog producer, my family does raise we do show pigs, and we have animals on our farm. But I've had all those other experiences where I've seen it from the youth side, I've seen it from the science side, and it was just fun to come to Farm Journal and to be able to tie a lot of that together.
Absolutely.
That's a long answer. I'm sorry.
No, but there's so much in there too.
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, there's so much in there too. But I mean, you never probably thought you would host a podcast, right?
No, I don't. Well, let's be real. I don't think I knew what a podcast was back in the day.
I know.
I feel like that's the fun thing about being in ag journalism is that it's always changing, and you're having to kind of reinvent yourself a lot.
Agriculture. Yeah.
So I think we just saw a need that it was there's a lot of podcasts starting, but then I was like, well, I don't want to have a podcast just because everybody else is having a podcast. But one of my favorite things to do is interview people, and I thought if I could find a way to tie in that experience so people could listen to it and maybe even see it, it was worth a shot, because I feel like a lot of farmers and producers are on the road so much or driving around, and maybe reading is hard for them, but listening is easier. So I thought I would try it, and I just taped my 50th episode here at the show, so I've officially gotten to 50, so that's kind of exciting.
That's so great. So tell us about the show. What's your goal with the Pork Podcast? What do you hope to do?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there's a lot of podcasts out there, and I'm like, how are you going to differentiate yourself and just be a little unique? I hope that the podcast provides people with some type of information or something that can help them do a bit of improvement on their own farm or in their own life. So not all of my guests are giving advice on pork production. I mean, sometimes it's just life stuff. So, I'm hoping that they gain something that's actionable or incitable, but I also really hope that I can tell the story behind the story. That's a big theme of my podcast. I think it's easy to see someone and think you know them from what you see maybe on social media, or you hear them speak at a conference, or you know of them as a leader in our industry, but you don't really know their story. And that's my favorite part of being a writer, is getting to know people's stories behind the story.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm hoping to bring to the Pork Podcast. And, that's largely dependent on my guests being willing to share that story. It's hard sometimes, I think, to share our stories and be authentic and real with people. But I feel pretty blessed that we've had a bunch of guests on who've been willing to do that. And they've survived, to live and tell about it. So, but that's kind of my hope of it.
Well, you do a great job telling their stories, and that it is part of it. I think sometimes we think of farmers as just this unknown entity, and they're just like us. They're eating the same food that they're producing for us, and they have amazing stories to tell, which you do such a great job of telling them. How do you come up with your guests? How do you find your guests, or how do you decide who's going to be on the show?
I think when you're kind of in that mode of always looking for a story, it's just every conversation that I had here with people, you start to develop a relationship, and you realize, oh, that's something that they really light up when they talk about that, or I didn't know they'd been through that experience. And I think in my mind, I just kind of have this little bit of an inventory of the people that I meet, and I jot down ideas after conversations, but I also ask people, who do you enjoy listening to? Or who's somebody who impresses you or has a cool idea on their farm? So I definitely am not afraid to ask some trusted friends in the industry who they might like to listen to on the podcast. There's so many people, though, my list is huge.
That's good. That's
so
good.
Then I have to kind of use my livestock judging skills and keep colon, no, not now, maybe later.
Right.
And people's jobs change. So sometimes on the list I've already had people's job change. I'm like, well, gonna have to change that approach. But this world is just full of amazing people's stories. A lot of people don't think they have a story to tell.
Right.
And I love that challenge of, I'm going to show you that you do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's been your favorite? Any favorite episodes? Is that tough to ask?
It's so tough to ask. And I was just talking to one of my guests, Dan Hamilton with PIC. I was just over at his booth, and I visited with him, and I'm like, I needed to come up with choose some of my best podcasts. And I have what makes a podcast the best too, a little bit of luck, maybe, that people happen upon it. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe really great synergy with your guests. I'm not really sure what makes the best podcast. And I feel like it's kind of like my kids. I couldn't choose a favorite because I really get attached to all of their stories.
I know.
But I would say when I asked AI, I tried AI, and I said, AI, I was like, who do you think are some of my best podcast episodes, which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
And as AI would do, it's not the same answer every time. So I'm not really sure I should trust it. But I did enjoy visiting with Dan Hamilton because he's such a great scientist, and he's done so many amazing things for our industry that way. He's also a really great leader, and he's very patient and calm, and I just think he's just kind of quiet. When he talks, you listen kind of a guy.
Yes.
But he's also been through an incredible challenge and hardship in his life, and a story that, quite honestly, I didn't know if I was going to be able to tell, right, and give it the right justice in a podcast, because it's just so much bigger than that. But he was really authentic and vulnerable and shared a hard story in a way that I told him when we got done, I'm like, somebody is going to be helped because of your willingness to share your hardship. And I've had a lot of guests on like that, where they've been through some really hard things in life and they're willing to talk about it. And then I have other people where we're just talking more industry issues and maybe digging into PRRS. And so, but even on those, I'm always challenged to be like, how do I get them to lighten up a little bit or tell us a little bit of real? So, a little bit more.
Any conversation that you learned something you didn't know, or changed your mind about something maybe?
That's a good question.
I'm just always curious, because you know so much and you have such a deep-rooted background in this industry. I'm just curious, was there anything that surprised you, or a guest that surprised you, maybe wow, that was...
Yeah. Well, you bring up the Dadsons. I loved getting to talk to them. So first of all, I obviously love the show pig industry. I love youth, working with young people. And so I wanted to know their story, but really, I didn't know the story very well. I think I looked at some of their social media, and I thought it was more of the dad. and it's really the mom. And not to go into all the details, but I mean, I just remember being like, oh, I thought I knew how this was, and no, I really didn't. And also to understand the reason for why they do what they do and what their heart is, I think that, I mean, I didn't really know. I just kind of blindly went into it, but I really enjoyed and was surprised. Like, I think it's important, and we all have the opportunity to be a voice for agriculture in one way or another. And maybe we don't all have, you know, maybe we don't all have a mom like that who can help sell our story in that way, but we also have opportunities that are small around us every day, and I admire what they're doing to try to tell their story, and I look forward to uncovering more stories like that of how are people being used to, you know, spread the good word about what agriculture is all about.
Yeah, and it's fun to be surprised sometimes on a podcast too.
Yeah, it is.
And along those lines, telling the stories, I mean, what part do you think podcasts and social media to a degree have in telling the story of agriculture? How important are they now to telling the story of agriculture?
Well, I think about this a lot because my daughter, Olivia, just turned 20, and she has been very passionate about trying to help bridge that gap. It's just inborn in her that she feels like her friends don't really understand agriculture. Her friends that aren't in agriculture don't understand agriculture. She's concerned about, you know, public perception. She's done some really exciting research projects through FFA, where she looked at, you know, consumer preferences around meat. And I think during that whole process, it became not lost on her of how social media is such a critical way that young people get information.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be correct information. It's information, and it's out there, and they take it as truth. And so we have a lot of conversations in our house. I don't know if every house is like this, but about how do I mean, I'm a storyteller at heart, and my venue for telling a story continues to evolve and change a little bit. But there's no doubt that social media and I think podcasts are a way that we're going to be continuing to tell this story, and we have to show up there because everybody else is. Right. So the people who are against agriculture are on there, and we need to make sure they know the truth. And so, and I think it's hard when you go by a barn and you know, or a big modern confinement building, and you can't see inside and you don't understand what it is.
Right.
And maybe your only lens is an activist video.
Right.
Goodness knows, right? So being able to open up your farm and let people in, I think, is important. And from a biosecurity standpoint, we just can't let everybody in. And so social media is one way that we can do that. Video is one way that we can help people see what we're doing. And kind of to circle back to the Dadsons, I mean, that's a little bit of what they're trying to do. You know, I know you don't really it's maybe more show specific, but at the end of the day, it's also about their role in agriculture too.
Yes.
So.
And the education, and you know, they get all kinds of questions on there from people who have no ties to agriculture, and then they answer them in a very positive way too. Even the negative stuff, they'll answer in a positive way, because sometimes people just don't know, and so
right. And it's scary when you don't know and when you don't understand.
Right.
I have to try to. It's hard, I think, when you've grown up in agriculture to understand what it's like to be on the other side.
I know.
And not know.
Yeah.
And so I try to remind myself, well, how do you feel about this? Like, I don't understand, you know, maybe certain things about artificial intelligence, for example, I don't know, lack of better thing. I don't maybe get it, and I have fears about it.
Yeah, exactly, the fear of the unknown.
So, I don't know if that's a great analogy or not, but I do think I have to stop and put myself in other people's shoes a lot, because it is really easy to just be like, come on.
I know, well,
your milk does not just show up at the grocery store from some factory. Like, this is a cow produced this milk.
Right, and just ask the questions. You know, just ask, even if you don't know, just ask that question that you think is the stupid question, because as you know, farmers and ranchers are the most open, transparent people that are around. They want to share their story. They want to tell you and educate you, and so just ask those questions. As we kind of wrap this up, what do you hope the story of the pork industry is moving forward into the future? What do you see the pork industry and the story around it being?
Yeah. I say this all the time, and I truly believe it's part of why I'm still engaged in the pork industry, is they are just incredibly intelligent people that work in the pork industry. They love science. They love research. They love getting better. They're hungry to improve, and they care so much about the animals that they raise every day. So like they're just really great people. And they're very resilient and deal with a lot of challenges that, quite frankly, we live in a world where people run into a roadblock and they give up. They quit, they find a new job, they move on. But pork producers are just wired a little differently. So I want people, I want to elevate their story. I want people to know how great they are. I want people to realize what it takes to produce the food that's on their plate every day. And at the same time, I really hope that story going forward is more people eating more pork and everybody's pork consumption going up a little bit. I have kids who have been involved in athletics, runners, wrestlers. Diet is something we talk about and think about a lot. And there's a lot of really great, healthy, nutritious cuts of pork that win on a vitamin standpoint, that win when it comes to protein. Like, I want my kids to have good food. And as a mom, like, that's really important to me. And I think there's some misunderstanding around pork that I just am excited to see continue to, the myths be dispelled so people can really understand and not miss out on some of the great value that pork has to offer. So I hope the story moving forward is one where it shines a light on the resilience and amazingness of our pork producers, while people are also eating more pork along with it,
Yes.
and realizing
Yes.
what a gift it is to be able to, sit down and enjoy some pork on your plate. So
I love that. I love that. It's a lovely way to end it too. You do a wonderful job of shining a light on the pork industry. Really, you're a great storyteller, a great host of podcasts. So thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for asking me. It was really fun. I enjoy your podcast too. I love it.
Good. We'll watch her podcast too.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us on Clear Conversations. We'll see you again next time.